We're in business. Let me get my article with my speaking notes. So, why do Muslims get angry? I accept a lot of what you say as that's the point of view that many Muslims buy into, and that's a partial explanation of why they get angry. But I think you can go a bit deeper, and I think it would be a good deal. It would be much more fair to go a lot deeper. You seem to want to get at what you call the root cause. I'm not sure. I'm kind of a root cause skeptic. I don't know. There are some causes I think you can put more weight on. They were more decisive or more important. But I'm a little suspicious of your bias here. That I'm very suspicious because you've externalized everything. I mean, that's a very human characteristic, and insofar as Muslims do that, they're being human, but it's not. It's one of the less appealing sides of humanity. Let's get on to the next point. According to Islamophobes, Robert Spencer, Pat Condell, and Thunderfoot. I know you like to group those together. The Pat Condells, the Thunderfoots, as if they're a type. And you really don't. One of the things I thought that was unfair about your video is that you didn't. You're condemning those type of people for not talking about the nuance, not talking about the subtlety, not talking about the point, this point of view that you portray of the average Muslim looking towards the West and seeing an aggressor. That they don't consider that, and yet at the same time you're not considering that there are a lot of legitimate reasons to criticize Islam, and I'm going to come back to that later. Receive insults to religion. So he asks us to metaphorically put ourselves in their shoes, which I agree, that's a healthy exercise, and I'm suggesting, Sami, that it would be good for you to metaphorically put yourself in the shoes of critics of Islam and see that there are some legitimate points that they have. They feel under attack. You know, I couldn't help but think when you say that it's a fact that they feel under attack, and then you substantiate it with a few examples. I can't help thinking about 9:5. Yeah, the Quran 9:5, verse of the sword. Because you know what? The apologetics I've always gotten with that verse, when I said, okay, well, this is a problematic verse in the Quran. It commands you to attack the unbelievers wherever you find them. And then the apologists say, only if they aggress. And yet I hear again and again from seemingly moderate, intelligent, otherwise peaceful Muslims that say the Muslim world, I hate doing air quotes, sorry, is under attack. So, gal, why aren't you out there going into getting involved with the jihad? I don't know, but it's a little scary, and that's why that verse is problematic, because one person's idea of what it means to be under attack could be quite subjective. So that's why I point out that 9:5 is a problematic verse, and remains so. Where do I want to go now? I don't know, the way you portrayed the Palestinians, I'm not an expert. It's a very complex issue, but I know enough to know it's not as black and white as you portray it. Really. If it was just a matter of, you seem to suggest it's just a matter of human rights. I know there's human rights problems there. I'm not an all-in 100% supporter of Israel, and I certainly am not a big supporter of Hamas at all. Hamas still has on their charter to the destruction of Israel as a goal. So this is not just a human rights issue. It's not that simplistic. But again, if your point is the average Muslim buys into this, does oversimplify it, then okay, sure, we agree. Yeah, so I thought that was a mischaracterization. This is not propaganda, this is a fact. And I think the House slanted. If it was a characteristic of propaganda is that it's all slanted in one direction for one purpose, and that's exactly what you're doing. You're spouting propaganda. It doesn't matter if the individual points are factual or not. They may be factual, but if they're taken out of context, if that set of facts that work in towards your goal are taken into consideration without looking at the other facts, then yeah, it could still be propaganda. Just because it's a fact doesn't exclude it from being propaganda. Everything I mentioned is a fact. Quote, Sami Zaatari. Imagine it was your country being bombed, and then that was the rhetorical peak of your video where you're saying, imagine if it was your mother, your sister, your brother, being raped and so on. That's, God knows there may be someone in the Middle East who all of that has happened to, but it's really, I'm going to give you an example absurdum, and I know that is it has its weakness, but I think there is a valid point to be made. The cost of running automobiles in the USA, for example, it's incredibly costly. In 2009, about 36,000 people died. So to me, it's like you're saying, what if your mother died 36,000 times in 2009 in a car crash? I've taken it to absurdity, but that's the sort of how your example fails. Imagine if it was your brother, your sister, raped, burned, killed, imprisoned on false terms. So that happens, and one point I'd like to make is you cycle through several 100,000 young people in a very stressful situation. Some of them are going to make mistakes. They're all not going to be perfect. So then they mock your religion after, raping and sodomizing and killing and unjustly imprisoning your family. This is just hyperbole. That happens, but it's dispersed. It's like the car accidents are dispersed, so no one ever has to face the tragedy of 36,000 mothers being killed or 36,000 people being maimed and dying. It just doesn't happen like that. So your analogy is a false analogy. And I am not trying to say that horrible things are not being... I'm not a spokesman in a defender of American and Western foreign policy. I'm not. I'm Canadian born. I live in Asia. It wasn't my army that went over to Iraq, okay? So when you get you and your crimes, which you did in the comments, it's your crimes. What crimes? It sounds like that Scientology Mark Bunker video. Is it confess your crimes, confess your crimes? Man, I didn't do that. And it's the same sort of mentality that so many people were critical of Pat Condell and of Thunderfoot for grouping them all in one big brush. You are up for the same sort of criticism, I feel. Yeah, I don't expect that people are going to be happy about seeing a portrayal of something that they're conditioned to feel, that's sacred and it shouldn't be portrayed in that way. And if they feel hurt about it, I expect that's going to happen. But that doesn't mean that the expression of free speech on using that as a device for free speech is illegitimate. Just because it hurts someone's feelings doesn't make it illegitimate. I mean, we cannot have it free speech and it really be free speech if it's under the condition that it doesn't hurt anyone's feelings or it doesn't insult anyone. That's hogwash. Free speech cannot work like that. Getting along here, moving along. But yeah, it's still free speech, and it's still free speech. I have to recognize I don't like a lot of stuff that you have to say, Sammy, but I still recognize your right to say it. I find a lot of the stuff that I hear, a recitation of the Quran, 434, I find incredibly problematic and disturbing. And yet, I'm pretty liberal in that I allow people to say what they want to say. I'm kind of an extremist in that way. You can say whatever you want, and I'm free to tell you you're full of BS. And you're free to do the same. That's the way it works. Yeah, you went on about how Westerners are, you tried to, make them the same, link them up. Westerners get upset with things that we hold dear. And I know they're probably, in some situations, if you went up to a soldier and told that soldier, I think what you did over in Iraq was a horrendous war crime and you should be ashamed of yourself, he's probably got to get angry. And if he was an unreasonable person, he might even smack you, But we're not talking about that. We're talking about your example point was where people drew the Prophet Muhammad. A lot of them were meatheads about it and it was just puerile, banal, insulting stuff. Some of it was rather intelligent, though. Some of it was rather thought-provoking, though. But one big brush. It's all just crap as far as you. It's all irrational, provocation only for the purpose of getting Muslims angry so that they can point their finger back and say, see how unreasonable those Muslims are? No, it's not. It's not one big brush. And again, that's the same reason why so many people were critical of Pat Condell and Thunderfoot. You criticize Robert Spencer. I've read some of Robert Spencer just to get his point of view. He at least would say, the average imam probably doesn't teach his followers to prepare for violent jihad. He would admit that, but you will not concede that any of the critics of Islam are anything but Islamophobes. That's why I say propaganda. If you have a right to do that, but you're going to get called out for it, and you ought to be called out for it. So I've gone there. You talk about what you call Orientalism. Sami, I can't help think hypocrisy here, because you're using one big brush to talk about the critics of Islam and then saying, they haven't done the thought experiments of placing themselves metaphorically in the average Muslim's shoes, and you haven't done the same. You haven't imagined, why would someone legitimately want to criticize Islam? Because there are legitimate reasons. There's the denial of women's rights in Muslim-majority countries. There is oppression and persecution of gays, lesbians, bisexuals, and transgenders people in Muslim-majority areas. And advocating for violence and oppressing non-believers. These are things that you can find quotes from Muhammad, either in the Quran or in the Hadith literature, where he's saying these things. So for me, Muhammad is a legitimate device of satire and criticism of Islam. I can't see how anyone would take a position otherwise and remain rational. Now, if your point here in your video is that the average Muslim sees this, I think you're right. I think you have described correctly what a lot of Muslims I've talked to hold this point of view. But I don't think it's a balanced point of view. And I think if we're going to make progress and improve relations between the Muslim world and the Western world, it's something they're going to have to let go of. It's something that they're going to allow to evolve and add the nuance and see that it's not just black and white, and that there are contributors to the problems on both sides. Okay, so I'm going to leave you with that to think about, and I don't really anticipate, judging from your comments, I don't really anticipate a response, but I had to get that off my chest just so people knew where I stood on it anyways. All right, take care and peace.